What's up, party people, and welcome back to another episode of NYC Foodways, your weekly food and culture discussion from the cultural capital of the world. My name is John, and this week's episode is dedicated to the OG from Tassie, Bill Mollison, the father of permaculture. I have here with me Nick Karam, who's going to be dropping knowledge on his Suburban ag project in Ardsley, New York, which I'm super excited to share with everyone. Before we get into the project itself, Nick, why don't you go ahead and share a bit about yourself and your background with the lovely viewers of NYC Foodways?
Absolutely. First of all, welcome and thanks for coming up. Glad to have you here. My name's Nick. I grew up actually just up the street, born and raised in New York, and spent some time in the city, back up in the suburbs. My background's actually in finance. That's what I went to school for and worked in a little bit. And then as I kind of evolved through technology and startups, I started to get some exposure to local restaurants, local foodways, and then most importantly, the local farmers markets. And that really captured me because I love food and I got to see the vibrancy of the local produce, just levels of magnitude higher than what I had before. So as I got interested in meeting these farmers and seeing how they brought that food to market, I wanted to get involved, and I just started asking farmers like, hey, can I come up and work for the day or pick weeds or plant things for the day? And of course they love free help. So I got to get my hands in the soil upstate in the Catskills and in Dutchess County, and fell in love with it. And I really resonated with the close connection that small farmers have with the land, and I wanted to be part of that, and I wanted to start growing my own food. So that, well, at the time I was living in the city, and that took it the place of joining a community garden in Brooklyn, and it was amazing getting to see, like, in this little tiny patch of forgotten land, that there were local New Yorkers that were growing the most amazing vegetables for their own use and for their friends. And from there, I got some experience growing. I got to train with some local agriculturalists who really knew their stuff, and started to get a pretty good idea of the way that nature works. And I'm still learning every day, and I'm always surprised. But the patterns that we can see in ecology, and applying them to growing food. And that's what agroecology is the interpretation and the observation and interpretation of natural patterns, so that we can grow food in healthier ways, not just for ourselves, but for the land as well. And so from there, once I had a little bit of base knowledge, I wanted to apply it. And I spent some time abroad, and then as last year the pandemic hit, I came back home to suburbia and decided to do something about it here. Every time I drive around and I see nothing but lawn and butterfly bushes, which are nice but not native, I realized that this area needed a little bit more active help. So far that's looked like me digging up degraded grass lawns and planting everything I can.
You used an interesting phrase earlier. You said forgotten land. And I think one of the biggest tragedies of kind of the way society is organized is that most land is forgotten by
Yes.
design. And I can't think of land that's more forgotten than the suburban lawn. And as you all will see shortly, this land is no longer forgotten. Nick has transformed a patch of ground in Westchester County into an incredibly vibrant, productive slice of life. So I think that's probably a good place for us to leave it. And we're going to head on to check out what Nick has done to beautify this property. Stay tuned.
Let's do it.
All right, folks, to get a better idea of exactly the change that Nick has wrought, we're going to check out kind of your typical suburban environs with what Nick has been working on these past months and years. So you can see at the dividing line a massive change. And Nick, if you could walk us through kind of what it took to get from the lawn you're standing on to the wild kind of patchiness that you're looking at, that would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a patch right now. It's and as you can see, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but the little bees and moths are going crazy right now on the flowers. Um, so this whole area was pretty degraded. Half the grass was removed just from having very shallow roots. It can't hold the soil, so it was just running down the hill, all the nutrients, all the fertilizer. And so what I did to increase the fertility and stability of this land is go down into the woods there and pull up fertile soil and bring it up here, put it into rows, and then immediately plant a whole diversity of species. So in this zone alone, there's probably 30 to 50 different species of plant, maybe more actually. And what that does in terms of the benefits of biodiversity is, one, providing an amazing habitat for wildlife, and two, improving the resilience of the land. So if we were to take a cutout into the soil here, you would see just a mass of roots, and that soil aggregate is a sign of resilient, healthy soil.
All right, that first patch we looked at was largely ornamental and medicinal, which we'll get to in a moment. I want to transition over here to a familiar sight to some of you, more consumption-based edible plants. So, Nick, can you tell us a bit about this patch right here?
Absolutely. This is the corn patch. And this was the first site I built, and the worst initially site I built. It had the most mistakes, just learning about how to move earth around in a sustainable way. So actually, this area for 40 or 50 years was this, about inches deep of red gravel. And that's something my grandpa had put down aesthetically. But this was dead. I mean, there was no life in this land. And last summer is when I started this, and I didn't grow much in it because the land itself just had nothing to it, no fertility. So again, I took fertile land from down there and brought it up here and mounted it. And as you can see, this year the corn's really taking off.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
I hope the camera can capture this, but we have some stalks that are well over 10 feet tall. Let's take a walk over there and check it out.
Sure.
As we head over there, can you speak a bit about the relationship between soil health and plant health for those who are unaware? Because it sounds like you did a lot of work in order to remediate the soil in order subsequently for this corn to grow massively high. I mean, this is Jack and the Beanstalk style corn. This is almost twice as tall as Nick. It's beautiful.
I'm almost 6 feet, so that you can guess how big that one is.
I don't think I've ever seen corn this tall, and I'd love to hear a bit about soil health versus plant health, or related to plant health.
Yeah, soil health is plant health. If you grab a handful of soil, there's millions of microbes and things that are doing their work silently that we would never even think about. So the soil down there was quite good. I also improved this soil, the life in the soil, boosting it with things like compost teas. Very few nutrients, actually, a little bit of compost, but then also cover crops. So growing things in here that increase the life of the soil, things like legumes, beans, that will form relationships in the soil to increase the nitrogen availability. So there's many practices that, again, nature does very, very well, that I'm adapting, and people adapt to growing food in a much more economical way.
And no garden is complete, or rather, no competent gardener would be complete without a bank of seeds and seedlings for upcoming crops. So Nick, if you could inform the folks about what you have germinating here and what your plans are to do with it.
Yeah, so this is actually a little bit late in the season, so I'm a little behind schedule on planting some of this stuff, but even then they're ready to get put in the ground. And there's a nice diversity of stuff here, everything from flowers, zinnias, and these should be bigger in the ground, but to special kinds of dandelions, to chamomile, and this is interesting. This is Korean silk flower in the marshmallow family. So it looks kind of like okra, but the leaves are reportedly one of the most prolific, highest yield vegetables. They've reported up to 150 tons per acre on that alone. So that's something I'd like to start to introduce here and have as a really good leaf vegetable. And then some native stuff like wild violets.
Over here, it looks like you got some interesting stuff growing. Are these squash?
Those are squash that I should put in the ground soon with little nasturtium coming up. So if you want to taste that, actually,
Absolutely.
is kind of a nice little salad and beautiful leaf, and it has a really nice flower too,
Oh, I love that.
with like wasabi vibes, right?
Yeah, there's some, absolutely, some horseradish situations. Well, this is really neat. You know, a lot of folks will use a greenhouse, but this part of the property gets tons of sun, so this is ideal for a seedling bank. All right, Nick, can you go ahead and highlight some of your favorite plants that you're growing and kind of their special properties?
Absolutely. So this one here with the purple flowers is called Agastache. That is the Latin name, and actually, it's not actually native to New York. It's native to more like the Great Lakes regions. But really beautiful plant, blooms for a very long time. As you can see, the bees love it. Uh, very good edible, good for digestion. Was traditionally used as like an antiseptic as well, and great in like stews or with fruit. We can actually grab like a little nibble of it too if you want to taste it. Kind of reminds me of a sweet licorice, and very prolific reseeder. So once you have it, it'll naturalize. So now that we talked about Agastache funiculum, we'll show her sister, Agastache nepetoides, which is, this one is native to New York, and it's actually threatened or endangered. So very rare. I've never seen it in the wild. Apparently there is a park in New York City that has it, but I've reintroduced it back into this area. Also edible, and used as a wash for poison ivy. The flavor is good in the spring, kind of like shoots I'll put in like stir fry. These are called basket flowers, Centaurea. Beautiful flower and very long blooming. The bees absolutely go crazy on this one as well. That it's reportedly really high in nutrition for wildlife. So it is a great pollinator plant. And it's also a very good industrial plant for agriculture because it produces a lot of biomass. So really good as a cover crop. So typically what I'll do is like let it flower and then I'll chop it and drop it, and it'll help to build the fertility of the soil. Uh, not a lot of information medicinally about this, but it's found a lot in historical Native American campsites. So it was reportedly used for things like the liver. If we look at Centaurea, the genus is a lot of uses for like cleansing the liver, but a bit bitter. And bitter things are associated with the liver.
This one has a really interesting name. You drop some knowledge on this guy?
Yeah, this is burnweed. The Latin name I always mispronounce, but American burnweed. This is a real pioneer plant like Centaurea that I just showed you, and it typically shows up after wildfires. Didn't burn anything here, but it's still an early pioneer native species. And again, not too much info on it, but it is used edibly. I think it tastes kind of like culantro, like the sawleaf cilantro, if you ever tasted it. And yeah, strong but good. Like would be good in like a mango salad, is what I've heard reported it good in, like that sharpness.
That is delicious.
Yeah.
You know, folks, we're so reliant on the supermarket to provide these flavors grown in California. The first small number of plants that we've sampled here today would fill any salad easily as
Yes.
as a topping, as a main ingredient. And this is all in your own backyard. It's really remarkable that these, I guarantee you, the majority of folks, probably myself until 10 minutes ago, would want to tear these out of their yard, but they're very tasty.
In here, and this is actually late in the season for it. Earlier, and I'll show you the flower stalks. A lot of mullein here. It's comes up on its own. I didn't plant it, but very very useful as a healing plant. It's antiseptic, and mashed up is good if you have like wounds and stuff. So once in the community garden, I put a blade through my hand really deep and was bleeding, and a fellow member made me a poultice out of mullein and wrapped it, and it was so soothing. So yeah, really nice, useful plant that is very easy to find on roadsides here or in under all our stuff here.
You know, a lot of the most kind of slept on or ignored heritages of plants, I think, in this country and in our dominant culture is the spiritual or esoteric link between, you know, the earth, what the earth produces, and humans. And from what I understand, you planted something here that might be able to bridge that gap a bit. So can you share with the viewers
Yes.
a bit.
Yeah, this one is called Desmanthus, bundle flower. Pretty understated, but I really like these frilly leaves. This is a legume, so it is a good cover crop, nitrogen fixing. What's really interesting about it is it can be used in a shamanic brew similar to ayahuasca, that it does have the DMT compounds in it. I've never done it, but if that's something that you're interested in. But another actually really interesting potential use is as a food crop, that these flowers produce a type of seed that the USDA has studied as a potential staple food crop. Really, really healthy. I'll show you what the seed bundle looks like here. This has been chewed on by deer again, but inside are seeds that can be cooked. So multi-use plant, very cool.
All right. And for the last plant focus, I would be remiss if we did not talk about this titan of corn.
Definitely a titan, and it hasn't even gone to flower yet. But so the idea behind this system was it's meant to be a milpa system, which is the three sisters, an indigenous method, corn, beans, and squash together, and they all grow complementary. So I have gotten some beans and squash. They've mostly gone to the wildlife, but the corn seems to be doing its own thing very well. I have maybe 10 or 15 different species of corn here, or different varieties rather. Uh, one of which I believe is its own fixing corn. There is a story of corn in Mexico that is able to fix its own nitrogen, and I believe this is one of those varieties because it is so prolific. And even though the soil is very rich, you could see that it's doing much better than some of the other corns here. So whether that's because it's the particular variety or because it is nitrogen fixing, I still have yet to discover.
One thing that's kind of neat about the corn patch is that not only do we have this monster corn, but it looks like we've got quite a bit of greenery underneath, almost like a forest canopy versus undergrowth.
Yes.
Want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been the idea, and as this becomes a perennial system, I want to improve it even more. Is that underneath here there are shade tolerant herbs, everything from like a wild lettuce here, and then here are some of the squash, which are actually not very shade tolerant, um, but these seem to be happy. And the idea is I can have a multi-layered food system in a very small piece of land.
You know, walking around here today and just being around this level of biodiversity and beauty, it speaks to something really fundamental that we've lost. I say we, I mean we as in city dwellers, New York City dwellers in particular, but really in a general sense, I think we as a species really have suffered terribly from the rupturing between a living, open, organic system like these patches of biodiversity and kind of the formerly living, open, organic system that humans organize themselves into kinship networks and shared levels of responsible for child rearing, shared levels of responsibility for food production and preparation and consumption. And I don't know if this is something that you're after in crafting this project, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of the greater, maybe metaphoric or representational aspects of doing something like this.
Sure. Well, firstly, I was really inspired by a lot of the indigenous mindset of natural relationships and ways of life, that it is very interconnected, from the creation of growing to the destruction of wildfires, and that cycle applied to our lives. And that's why I do my best to emulate that in my system as well. And yeah, I think we have to be really mindful about how we're moving forward as a civilization, especially in these tumultuous times, where our food is going to come from, how far it comes from, and what's actually in it now. We have to be healthier than ever and more resilient than ever, and we found that the best way to do that is to either grow our own or get it from somebody who's growing their own nearby, our neighbors and our friends. And I look at that as the future of food, is something that and to you, the name of your channel, what is a foodway, is like, those are foodways. Is the relationships not only that we have with the food, but the people who steward and take care of that food, and for generations have been able to preserve the techniques and the varieties of their ancestors. So if we could apply that to many things in our lives, I think we'd be a lot better off.
One of the challenges that I find myself running into with some frequency is a feeling of nihilism or hopelessness in trying to grapple with the greater kind of questions around food, around foodways, around the intersection of late stage industrial American style economics with the way that we produce, distribute, and consume food. But being out here on a piece of land that could easily have been forgotten, like the hundreds of millions of other lawns in this country, and seeing what you've done really does give me a real, tangible sense of hope, light in the darkness, and it's powerful. It really is, and it's powerful in a vacuum, unto itself, and it's also powerful, kind of in opposition to the fact that we can hear cars going by, and that hasn't stopped you. That hasn't stopped you from being the best steward for this small patch of land as possible. And I'd love to hear where, that requires a lot of strength, and I'd love to hear where does that strength come from? How are you able to revisit that well without being totally disillusioned, as I am often, as I think a lot of us are always?
It's a great question. I didn't always have that strength, for many years, especially as I began to learn about the environment and shift my mind towards this journey. I was in that mode of negativity, about feeling sort of hopeless, seeing the development stretch on for miles, and just the level of degradation that we're doing. And then as I was sitting about it, I was like, wow, maybe that's selfish, because it's paralyzing, right? And knowing what I know, I could apply it and maybe create a little patch of beauty and health in my space, and then also inspire others to do that as well, and show them that it is accessible, and it is a way forward. So the idea of acting in service, I think, can be very empowering, because it's not just for you anymore, it's for your community and you within the community. And I think if we celebrate that in our communities as, hey, let's inspire people, and let's give access to grow food, plant things, take care of this wondrous system that we've been given. It's a gift. To me, that shifts my mind towards a positive thinking.
That's an incredibly powerful sentiment, and I can't thank you enough for sharing it and sharing your slice of beauty with me and with everyone watching this channel right now.
A pleasure.
I think this is a great place to end it. I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on NYC Foodways. Peace.